Welcome to the Net 30 podcast. I'm Chris Elmore, AvidXchange's chief evangelist. AvidXchange is a leading provider of accounts payable automation software and payment solutions for middle market businesses and their suppliers. Now, I've spent 22 years in this space, and I've had over 8,000 conversations with accounts payable departments, and I've actually written 8 books on the accounts payable process. And if you want to clear a room at a party, you tell them you've written a book about accounts payable. Each month, the Net 30 podcast is going to unpack the problems, solutions, and innovations impacting the careers of financial professionals with a focus on accounts payable. And we're going to do this in less than 30 minutes. Today is our very first episode. I'm sitting down with 2 of the smartest people I know to discuss the state of accounts payable and what the future may hold for the professionals that do this work. So let's introduce my guest for this episode of Net 30. Gary Larson, you look giddy. Can you tell?
I'm excited. Any chance I get to spend time with Rhonda Greene, it's a good day.
Okay, I thought you were going to go for me, but that's okay. That's all right. That's okay. Rhonda did, what do you call that? Heart hands?
The heart hands.
It's a podcast, so I guess no one really sees.
But it was just for Gary.
Oh, it was. You got heart hands right out of the gate. A little Justin Bieber. So introduce yourself, Gary. What should folks know
hey,
about
everybody.
you?
Gary Larson here with the sales readiness team. Just excited to spend time just talking about some of the future of AP with you.
There you go. And we also have a true celebrity in the studio today, in the AvidXchange podcast studio, Rhonda Greene. Now, when I first met you, you weren't Rhonda Greene.
No, I was not.
Yes, and you went to Home Depot, you met a boy, got married.
I got married.
I know lots of personal stuff.
It was actually Lowe's, but
it was
yeah.
Lowe's, okay. It was
But
Lowe's.
yes.
You met a boy at Lowe's.
I did, yes.
Yeah, and then you got married.
And the rest is history, shall we say. So
There you go.
Yeah.
Well, what should folks know about you, Rhonda Greene?
Well, I have been at Avid now for 10 and a half years, which is hard for me to believe because the time has just flown. But right now, my current role, I'm a principal solutions consultant. So I work with our sales team to, demonstrate our products and talk to who I've always viewed as my peers, other people in the AP space, help them understand that automation is the way to go.
There you go. Now, and I've known, Gary, you've been at AvidXchange for what?
8 years.
8, and I've been at AvidXchange for 22.
Mm-hmm. You're better than us.
I don't know. I don't know what that is. My AvidXchange tenure is something I am actually pretty proud of.
Of course.
And if you ask Mike Prager if he thought I would, I remember when I got my 20-year anniversary, we were at an all sales meeting, and he said, I never thought he was going to make it past 3. And he's right, because I get distracted easily. I'm actually prepared for this moment. And there's 3 things that we want to talk about. We want to talk about workforce, workload, and workplace. I like to say, and Gary, I think you called it, is that it's the physical location that we work, the work that we physically do, and then the people that do the work. Yep. Let's start at the top of this, which is, so there's 3 things that we're going to talk about: workplace, workload, and workforce. So at the top of this are the physical locations. Castle Systems did a study on actual key card swipes, and what they found out is that about half the buildings are completely empty. Recent AvidXchange research revealed 30% of companies are preparing for a potential recession in a number of ways. Most commonly, the reduction or elimination of office space. And 3, a 2022 workplace trend survey by Envoy shows where companies are investing dollars to improve their workplace. Free snacks and new dry erase markers, which I'm a big fan of, both of, are way down on the list. Wow, the two largest investments are actually things that make it easier to stay away from the office. 1 is being conferencing technology, and 2 is remote collaboration tools. And Rhonda, I'll go to you first for reaction. What do you think this is doing to our world?
I actually think it's a good thing because, people like me, that we're in my situation, to Gary's point, I would have quit. And probably some of these people now, that have, all of these, especially women, who are raising children and, doing all of these other things, they need that work-life balance. So I think if anything, especially now with technology, with, automation, things that we never thought was possible 20 years ago, I never in a million years would have thought that an AP team would ever be able to work remote because they were touching so much paper. And so to me, it's a wonderful thing. And I think people are much happier because of it. And I think that the result is everyone is doing a better job. They're more satisfied and, they're appreciated.
And Gary, I need to get your reaction on this. But before I do, if you, dipping back into your experience, you ran an AP department. Mm-hmm. How many people were?
I've ran a couple different AP departments, and at one time I was over 12 different AP specialists.
Yeah.
And that was back when everything, was 100% manual. That was before automation, before, it even existed. And so you had to have people on site to open that mail and to file because, you had to retain all of your invoice images, your check copies, all of that. So you had people that just filed. And so, obviously with that level of manual work, there was no working remote. So that's why for me, it's exciting to see that it's come this far and that these people are able to now with the help of technology.
That leaves a pretty big void, Gary, in the office space world.
Well, it does, but technology has stepped up remarkably well. Like Teams, Microsoft Teams, Zoom. I think Zoom is like, you have the statistics that went from like 10 million to like a billion users per month or some ridiculous number.
You're right. It was in December 2019, it was 10 million users that month. And then in 2020, May, it was 200 million. And then June, it was 300 million.
Wow.
The exponential growth. So that means we have the technology to support the 12 individuals that would have been on Rhonda's team to work remotely for you to still feel connected to the business, to still be able to work and to perform. And all the state, all of the data that we've seen, all the surveys, all of that stuff shows that on average, people actually perform better in a hybrid environment. Their satisfaction goes up, their retention goes up. We'll talk a little bit about some of that stuff, but I think there is a gap, but there is certainly an opportunity to leverage this technology to where it's becoming the norm. And as you interview people, they're almost expecting to be able to work one day, at least a couple days from home.
Moving on to workload handled by the accounts payable departments. Here's a few numbers by our pals from IOFM that's at the table. So are you ready, Rhonda? Drama. Ready. And I'm looking specifically at you, Gary, to just react first, is that when COVID hit in 2020, invoice volume fell by 22%. Mm-hmm. And then it started to make this remarkable climb. And starting in Q1 of 2022, there were now, as we're sitting now, 5 consecutive quarters of growth. So, but the thing is this, because of inflation, not only is the volume growing, but the dollar amounts are growing. So accounts payable people are being asked to work on more stuff. Mm-hmm. And it says here that the thing that companies are choosing is overtime versus adding staff and adding automation. And that means that they're working with higher dollar amounts and higher volume.
Yeah. So so in synthesis, the same amount of people are doing more work and handling more money.
Right.
Which is more risk for the business. And I remember when I started at AvidXchange, we still had a part of one of our teams on the 3rd floor in Metropolitan that was keying in financial data on a spreadsheet. Yep. And if there was any mistake on that spreadsheet, like it could go from like a $12,000 invoice to $120,000. If you think of businesses doing that in mass, in volume, and you're asking people to do that more frequently, and now those numbers are getting bigger, that's a tremendous amount of risk that you're putting on people when you could potentially automate a lot of those errors and keystrokes.
you punch in an extra zero. Have you had that in your career, Rhonda?
Yes, I think anyone that has done manual data entry has had some sort of issue like that. And, especially when you're working in that manual world, as a manager, you have to almost account for that, and you have to come up with controls, reactive controls, to be able to look for these things in the back end to try to catch them, because they're going to happen, right? So you need to do extra review, looking over, the invoice register to see everything that was entered, making sure nothing looks, out of line. Like we normally pay this company $1,500, and now this invoice is $15,000. That doesn't look right. But so you're having to, account for that data entry, those manual errors, is going to happen.
So you're asking a person to manually check the manual work.
That's exactly right.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why you have checks and balances.
That's exactly right.
Yeah. You said something to me years ago that's always stuck with me. You said lots of things to me, but this one is accounts payable never gets recognized. I'm doing air quotes, but accounts payable never gets recognized until someone does something wrong.
Oh, that is the truest statement I have ever said, because, AP is such an important department, because all of the invoices are flowing through in the expense reports. And as long as everything is just ticking along, it's great. But the first time that someone is paid late, or you miss a discount, or you code something wrong, then, you're like, what in the world? AP, oh my gosh, AP did this, they did that. And there's all of this focus on, oh my gosh, AP made this error. Because again, when you've got a department that's working with money going out the door, heavily scrutinized and audited, as it should be. Yeah. But, that's just something I've always said. So I always made sure as a manager over the years that I let my team know, hey, I know how important you are and all the good work that you do.
So let's talk about those people. Did you know that 80% of accounts payable professionals are women?
Yes.
You knew that? You did? But the other thing is, when the pandemic hit, 2 million women left the workforce.
Wow.
This is kind of the information that we're getting. But it's now since recovered. And in a recent study, 12,000 workers were asked when they're choosing a new job. So the idea is a bunch of people left, now they're coming back. When they're choosing a new job, and actually I have a statistic here. I have the numbers here, but if you look at it, when they first choose a new job, money is big. But the thing that I wanted to get you to react on is, if you look at everything on this chart, and sorry folks that you don't see the chart, but I'm going to kind of explain it. If you look at everything on that chart and take out everything that's financially driven, it comes back to working conditions.
Oh, absolutely.
Working environments. Yeah. What's your reaction to that?
And I also love the better career opportunities, because, while data entry,
number 2 on the list.
Absolutely. While data entry is very important, it's tedious and boring, and it's the same thing over and over again. So, of course, AP folks want to do more, right? They don't want to just sit and enter things. So that is absolutely, it tracks with everything that I've known and everything that I continue to hear today. And to what we've been talking about, the flexible working arrangement is number 3, because again, you can do hybrid work now where you couldn't do it before. So why not do it and give those people what they're looking for?
And you have this workforce predominantly of women in the AP space that are having to consider the cost of health care for their child care for their kids in the Charlotte area. It's like $1,200 a month on average. So is my income of doing whatever work this is going to offset that? And oh, by the way, you're making me drive 45 minutes each way at $4.50 a gallon. So all of these things start to factor into whether or not people want to come into the work environment. And employers that have more flexibility with not only your work environment, but your office hours, and also providing you an opportunity to grow. Because I don't want to consistently just do this one thing. I want to see myself grow. They're the ones that are going to do generally the best.
And then when we started digging into technology. We started finding, Gary, that people where their employers have invested heavily in automation specifically, their job satisfaction goes up.
There was a huge correlation in the data to show employee satisfaction tied to automation. And you would almost think that the knee-jerk reaction for some people is think that it's inverse, that it's like, oh, it's taking my job, I'm afraid. And what you actually found is the inverse, where it's taking all of the crap I don't want to do, and it's given me the value-add activities that are left over, plus the additional stuff I never got to do. I mean, I think if Rhonda had her team, there were probably some individuals in that 12-person roster that it's like, man, were they ever underutilized? But I couldn't. We got so much paper to give through. I would love to give you this other project, but you got 3 feet of paper you got to pile through.
Is that true, Rhonda?
Absolutely, it's true. I mean, you wanted to be able to grow your team, but at the same time, the job has to be done. And when it takes so long to do, open an invoice and then look at it and figure out how it needs to be coded, and then you have to scan it in, and then you're emailing it to someone, you don't have time to, let someone go and shadow. You do the best that you can because you don't want to lose these people. But the single greatest thing is being able to, and this is exactly how I felt about the payment services division here, is being able to hire talent that has that go-getter attitude and help them get to where they want to be. That, and at my age now, that is so important to me. It's so fulfilling and rewarding. And I hear this all the time when I talk to customers, that they're not looking, when they're looking at automation, they're not looking to come in and mow down half their workforce. They love these people. They've worked with them for years, and they want them to be able to do other things. And so it's exciting to know that even though you can obviously, cut head count with automation, but a lot of folks, that is not the driver at all.
So
I was just going to say, I'm thinking about some of my notes, and we were talking about the leveraging extra days of PTO. There are a lot of organizations that are going to unlimited PTO.
Yeah.
Like if you need it, take it, right? That's an impossible concept for Rhonda's team back in the day.
Is that
that would have crippled the business?
Maybe you could have announced we're doing unlimited PTO, but you have to get your work done.
Well, yeah, but guess what? The
Very
work was
important.
never done.
Right.
Like every day you came in, there was still a stack of paper that you had to get through. So those individuals would have never felt safe, and the leaders would have never felt safe saying, go ahead and take PTO, that's fine, because the amount of manual work that needed to be done was unending. And what you're seeing now with companies that are offering these creative, flexible work-life packages is they're doing that because they can manage the work virtually, remotely, and when the work starts, when it stops, versus it's just an ending pile of just paper falling on you.
That's right. And, the daily grind, as we would call it, that all has to be done. But then every month, you've got month end. That just adds additional work to you, but you still have to get your normal daily work done. So you're going to have to stay over to do that. And then year end is just a complete crazy time where, normally you'd love to give people off for the holidays, but nope, can't do it because we've got to get all of these invoices entered. And then you've got 1099 season and the auditors are coming in. And so the stress level is so high, all while you're maintaining that day-to-day responsibility of opening that mail and entering those invoices.
Gary's getting emotional.
I'm tearing up a little bit. I had hair on top of my head, it'd be turning gray, Rhonda.
Like mine.
This is, I just think about like the fact that this was the standard, let's say 20 years ago, and all the way back to the beginning of the workforce, or even 10 years ago.
Yeah.
But I can't imagine me going into a work environment and doing that and saying, I made a good choice by coming here.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding
That's
me?
the whole point. Is that two things. One, I think you mentioned this, but it maybe it bears repeating. One is that those companies that are more automated, there's a higher job satisfaction. But then the second thing is the employees look more favorable on the leadership.
Absolutely. They don't want to go where they know that they're just going to have to wade through a bunch of paper. I look at, like my children, millennials, I guess they're called, and they don't want want to work with paper. They're like, why do you even do that? They don't write checks. They don't even, know how to balance a checkbook or any of these things. And so when they go to work, they're like, why are we doing this? This doesn't make any sense. So that has been a driving force the last few years, and I see that continue to happen. And one of the things that I always tell people is that when people my age and older, as we start to retire out, things are going to change even more and for the better.
Is that true? This is the controversial part. You're getting all choked up.
I am. I'm getting emotional.
Here's my thought. My thought is that when the younger people join the workforce, they're taught how to do the job. And then someone somewhere along the way is going to have to say, we've got to stop doing it this way. Now, the group of people we serve aren't necessarily really good at doing that.
You're always going to have, I call those people steady eddies. You're always going to have those that are just fine with doing that. But it's the ones that you're always going to have that come in and question it and go, this doesn't make any sense to me. So as those people come into like management, so you've got those people that are going to be moving up the management roles, going to accounting manager, to controller, whatever, then they're going to have the power to say, I've said all along that this paper was stupid. Right. And so we need to fix this. And so now I'm in a position to do it or at least influence it. So I'm going to do it.
Well, and the steady Eddie generally is going to have a hard time attracting the cool new talent that will stick around. They might start.
You need to give a name to the cool new talent.
Well, the cool kid is Cool Chris.
Okay.
Right? So Steady Eddie is going to lose talent because these younger demographic, they're working for Cool Chris, and word gets out that it's like, dude, why are you using like all this paper? We do that and we press 3 buttons. Or like, see ya, Steady Eddie, I'm going to work with Cool Chris.
Yeah.
And they talk, peers talk. And so, I'll talk to a CFO and they'll say, a good buddy of mine over at ABC company, they just recently implemented automation. And he was talking to me and he was like, I can't believe that you're still doing it this way. And it got me to thinking that we probably ought to look into it. So they're being influenced by those peers that are moving ahead with automation.
I always said that the reason why the United States automobile industry automated is because Japan did it and Toyota took all the market share.
Yeah.
But look, so we got to close this up. Kind of final thoughts. So we've talked about a lot of things. I want to try to bring it into one kind of a couple of pieces of advice. So we have new work environments. We have a greater workload, the higher dollar amounts, higher risk. Gary talked about that. And then we have the same people doing the work. And so what our data is telling us, employers have chosen overtime versus more people and better technology. Why is that, Rhonda?
I mean,
what would you tell those people?
I would say what? I mean, because what? No, they're going to get burned out. I mean, people may want overtime some, but to ask your people to continuously work over, that's just asking for trouble, because eventually they're going to get tired and they're going to be like, this is stupid. There's a better way to do this. I know. Or I have a friend that works over here and she's out the door every day at 4:00. So I don't know, why am I having to stay here till 6? So that is not sustainable at all, and people won't stand for it for long.
The rate of acceleration of the adapt or die with this topic has accelerated, and the pandemic accelerated that conversation. It accelerated AvidXchange's mindset on what we're doing with buildings and how we work. So for other companies, it's not a negotiable. It's going to happen. So it's an adapt or die framework we're in, and we're trying to help people like adapt as quick as possible to help them, because once you fall behind that action curve, generally speaking, your business is going to really struggle, and it's going to be hard to come out of that.
Having lived it personally and knowing both sides, the completely manual side versus where we're at now, it's hard for me to understand why anyone wouldn't just pull the trigger on this. But, we're talking about accountants, we're talking about controllers and CFOs that they're
called a controller for a reason.
That's exactly right. And so, they're going to be cautious and conservative by their very nature. So, we've got to get out there and really talk about, do these sorts of surveys and really bring the data to them so that they understand that this is how it's moving and this is how it's going to be. So why fight it?
Yeah. Well, to wrap us up, Gary says the rubber band's going to snap one day. You better do something about it. And Rhonda, you said, why fight it? You're perplexed because you've been on both sides. But the other thing is that you recommended that people should go to their leadership and say, we should do this, and here are the reasons. And I got to tell you, this job satisfaction survey, I think, should be at the top of that list, is that employees are more satisfied and they look more favorable on their leaders when automation is in play.
Yep.
There you go. Well, thanks so much. This is the Net 30 podcast. Rhonda, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, and as usual, Gary, always a pleasure to hang out with you.
Good to hang out with you, Chris. Thank you, guys.
Thanks for listening to the Net 30 podcast presented by AvidXchange. This episode was produced by Travis Durkee. If you like what you heard, make sure you leave us a 5-star review and subscribe to this channel. One more shameless plug before we go. If this conversation somehow piqued your interest in accounts payable automation, or if you want to know just a little bit more about AvidXchange, there is an additional link to request a demo of our solution. That's it. We'll see you next month on the Net 30 podcast.